The new babysitter, Clarissa, smiled sweetly. She had perfect references, a clean background check, and came recommended by the school counselor. But the dog, a retired K-9 named Murphy, trained to sniff out danger, wouldn't stop growling the moment she stepped near. When he barked so furiously, he knocked over a lamp. No one laughed anymore. The Olivers had never needed a babysitter before. Not really. Sandra worked remotely as a data analyst, and James was usually off by 4. But a last-minute project deadline and an unexpected out-of-town client dinner meant they needed someone fast. Their usual sitter had moved away for college. So when Clarissa showed up cheerful, calm, and punctual, they felt lucky. She looked like a dream. Mid-30s, neatly dressed, kind smile. She brought her own book and even offered to wash the dishes while the kids played. "My mom raised me to leave a place better than I found it," she said, placing her purse gently on the counter. But Murphy didn't buy it. Murphy was a 10-year-old German Shepherd, once the pride of the local K-9 unit. He'd sniffed out weapons, tracked missing persons, and protected officers under gunfire. Now retired and a little stiff in the hips, he was a kid's playmate, protector, and permanent shadow. He hadn't growled in months, until now. This whole moment, as Clarissa leaned toward little Ellie to ask if she liked puzzles, Murphy let out a low rumble. At first, James laughed. He's old school, probably just doesn't like strangers. But when Clarissa reached for a coloring book, Murphy stood up between her and the kids, body tense, ears pinned back. He didn't bark yet, just stood there, unblinking, like a soldier who saw something no one else could. Ellie clung to his fur. "He doesn't usually do that," she said quietly. Clarissa backed up, both hands raised in a calm, performative way. "Maybe I smell like a cat," she joked, trying to laugh it off. Sandra exchanged a look with her husband, then knelt beside Murphy. "It's okay, boy. She's here to help." Murphy gave a low whine and didn't move. The rest of the evening passed in uneasy quiet. Clarissa stayed at a distance, reading her book on the couch while the kids colored. Murphy lay between them and her, unmoving. The moment Clarissa rose to use the bathroom, his ears perked up. When she walked past the kids, he growled again. "Is he always like this?" she asked Sandra when she returned. Her voice was light, but her fingers clutched the couch cushion tighter than before. "Honestly, no," Sandra admitted. "He's usually a big softy." Later that night, after the kids were asleep and Clarissa had left, Murphy did something he'd never done before. He stood staring at the front door for almost an hour. The next morning, Sandra found Murphy pacing in front of the kids' bedroom door. When she opened it, he gently nudged his way inside, sniffed around every corner, then lay near Ellie's bed like a silent guard. By day 3, the Olivers were concerned enough to consider creating Murphy when Clarissa was around. "It's not like we think she's dangerous," James said, "but we can't have him knocking things over every time she walks in." And that's when it happened. It was a Thursday afternoon. Sandra was in a Zoom meeting, headphones on, when Murphy's bark shattered the quiet. Then a loud crash, glass breaking. She ran downstairs to find Murphy between Clarissa and the kitchen island, barking nonstop. Clarissa had backed into the wall, eyes wide. "He's crazy," she yelled. "He just lunged at me." A ceramic vase lay shattered on the ground. Murphy's eyes were locked on her purse, which had tipped over onto the floor. "Enough, Muff," Sandra yelled, pulling him back. But Murphy didn't budge. He let out another furious bark and nosed the bag with a hesitant hand. Sandra picked it up, and something small fell out, a syringe. Clarissa froze. Sandra blinked, confused. What is this?" I am diabetic, Clarissa stammered. "It's just insulin." "Then why was it hidden under your wallet?" James asked, entering behind them. Clarissa's face drained of color. I need to go." She grabbed her bag, pushed past them, and bolted out the door before anyone could say another word. That night, they checked the footage from their Nest camera in the living room, something Sandra had completely forgotten about. If this story is gripping you like it gripped us, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals. for more real-life stories of loyalty, instincts, and silent heroes like Murphy. The camera feed showed Clarissa checking the cabinets while pretending to tidy. At one point, she opened a bottle of juice in the fridge, pulled something from her purse, and leaned down, blocking the camera's view of the counter for just 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Sandra felt sick. James stared at the screen, his mouth half open. She was putting something in their drinks. Murphy had barked just after, and that's when she spilled it, causing the glass to break and the syringe to fall out. Sandra looked over at her dog, now sleeping by the fireplace. He knew from the beginning. Ellie, in her pajamas, came downstairs, rubbing her eyes. She walked straight to Murphy, curled up next to him, and whispered something her parents couldn't hear. Murphy licked her hand. For the first few hours after Clarissa left in such a hurry, James and Sandra didn't speak much. Their children were safe upstairs, watching cartoons. But a silence hung in the kitchen like a fog no one wanted to walk through. Murphy was curled on the floor, paws crossed, but alert. His eyes tracked every sound, every flicker of movement, just as they had in his working days. The broken vase had been swept up, the mysterious syringe placed in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, just in case. That night, after the kids went to bed, Sandra brought her laptop to the kitchen table. "You ready?" she asked James. He poured himself a cup of coffee despite the hour and sat beside her. "Let's see what the Nest Cam saw." They rewound to the late afternoon, around the time Clarissa had asked Ellie if she wanted apple juice. The screen showed the kids playing with crayons, while Clarissa moved casually between the living room and kitchen. She hummed to herself, adjusted a throw pillow, and eventually opened the fridge. She took out a bottle of juice and set it on the counter. Then she leaned slightly, her back to the camera. "Pause it," James said. Sandra did. "What's that in her left hand?" Sandra squinted. "Hard to tell. Could be a pen." "Back it up 10 seconds. She rewound, and there it was, a subtle motion of her reaching into her purse, retrieving something small, and holding it in her left palm. When she turned, it was gone. "Zoom in," James said. "It'll get blurry," Sandra warned. "I don't care." She did, and though it wasn't crystal clear, the shape in her hand looked eerily similar to the syringe that had fallen from her bag. The next morning, James drove straight to the sheriff's department. He sat across from Deputy Marshall, a no-nonsense man in his early 50s with a thick mustache and years of field work behind his eyes. James showed him the footage, the Ziploc bag, and explained everything Murphy had done. Marshall didn't say much, but when the video ended, he leaned back and let out a slow whistle. "German Shepherd," he said. "Yes," James nodded. "Retired K-9 from Oakwood PD. His name's Murphy." Marshall glanced at the ceiling, thinking. "There's something you should know," he said. "Your babysitter? She's not who she says she is." James blinked. "What?" "We've been tracking a woman named Karen Russo for nearly a year. Multiple aliases. She's wanted for questioning in 3 states. Nothing we've been able to stick, but people keep reporting odd incidents. Kids getting sick, pets reacting badly, surveillance footage disappearing. She's slippery." James felt his pulse rising. "So, she's dangerous." Marshall nodded slowly. "We don't have hard proof yet, but your dog might have just handed us the thread. We need to unravel the whole thing." Back at home, Sandra kept the kids distracted with a backyard picnic. Murphy, never far from them, sat beside Ellie like a bodyguard. Every time she reached for a sandwich or a juice box, he sniffed it first. Sandra didn't stop him. Later that evening, Marshall arrived with another officer to take a formal statement. They asked Sandra to replay the footage, collected the syringe, and wrote down every detail, including Murphy's behavior from the moment Clarissa entered the home. "We'll run this through the state database," Marshall assured them. "See what kind of fingerprints come up on that needle. Might be the break we've needed." That night, the news hit local TV. Mysterious babysitter under investigation. Retired K-9 saved family. A neighbor texted Sandra the link before she even knew it aired. James shook his head in disbelief. "We just wanted someone to watch the kids for a few hours." Murphy wagged his tail slightly, but didn't leave his spot beside the children's bedroom door. 2 days later, The phone rang. It was Officer Marshall. "We got a match," he said. "The fingerprint on the syringe is linked to a case out of Arizona. A child there fell into a coma. Parents suspected foul play, but had no proof. The babysitter left town the next day. Guess who was working for them?" Sandra's stomach turned. Clarissa, under the name Melanie Dupont at the time. But yeah, same woman, same look, different ID. "What happens now? We've issued a warrant. State police are looking for her. And listen, your dog, he's a hero." Over the next few days, reporters started calling. A few wanted to interview the family. Others asked for access to the nest footage. One even offered money for an exclusive story. But James and Sandra declined. They weren't ready for the circus. Instead, they did something else. They brought Murphy to the elementary school for show and tell. It was Friday and Ellie had begged, "Please, Mom, can I bring Murphy?" Everyone brings snacks or stickers. No one has a hero dog. So they did. Murphy wore a blue bandana with a paw print badge that read K, 9 retired but ready. When Ellie stood in front of class, she pointed proudly and said, "This is Murphy. He used to be a police dog, and he saved me and my brother from a very bad person." The teacher's eyes glistened. Parents clapped. Murphy barked once, as if to say, "You're welcome." That weekend, the doorbell rang. It was Officer Marshall. In his hand was a plaque with a gold plate that read, "Murphy for loyalty, instinct, and the protection of the innocent." "We don't give these out often," he said, "but your boy earned it." James knelt beside Murphy and rubbed behind his ears. "You're not just our dog. You're family." Murphy wagged his tail hard, enough to thump against the wall. But there was one last moment, quiet and unexpected, that stuck with Sandra most. Sunday night. Kids in bed, James asleep. Sandra walked into the living room to turn off the lights and found Murphy sitting in the dark, facing the front door, as if he was still on duty, still waiting for a threat that might come back. She sat beside him, rested her hand on his back, and whispered, "You knew all along, didn't you?" Murphy let out a deep sigh and laid his head on her lap. The sun was barely rising over the neighborhood when Sandra stepped outside with a cup of coffee, her slippers whispering against the dew-covered porch. Murphy followed close behind, settling near her feet like he always did. But even in the calm of the morning, she could feel it, like something unfinished was still floating in the air. The news hadn't died down yet. Every parent in their school district had seen the story. Some called to offer support, others texted questions, and a few quietly admitted, "We almost hired her, too." What haunted Sandra most wasn't the footage or even the syringe. It was how normal Clarissa had seemed, how easily she slipped into their lives, how even a mother's instinct hadn't been as sharp as a dog's. That thought stuck like a thorn. By Tuesday afternoon, Officer Marshall called again. "She's on the move," he said. "We confirmed aliases in Ohio, Colorado, and Texas, all in the last 2 years. She changes her name, targets families with young kids, usually offers nanny services through local boards." Sandra closed her eyes. "Is she working alone?" "We think so, but she's smart, real smart. Uses burner phones, prepaid cards, never leaves fingerprints, except this time, and the Arizona case." Marshall sighed on the other end. "That little boy is still in the facility. He hasn't spoken since. Parents thought it was a seizure, but your footage helps us reopen that case and connect her others." Sandra clutched the phone harder. "You think she was experimenting?" There was a pause. "She wasn't trying to hurt the kids permanently," Marshall said. "She wanted something else. Maybe access, maybe control. Whatever her motive is, it's not random. And now she knows we're watching." Meanwhile, Murphy had become a local celebrity. People stopped James at the grocery store to ask how the miracle dog was doing. Someone anonymously left a chew toy and a note that read, "Thanks for protecting the little ones." The vet called and offered free checkups for life. Even the mayor's office sent a letter of commendation. But Murphy didn't seem to care. He spent most of his days trailing Ellie and Tommy, keeping a quiet watch from doorways, hallways, and behind furniture. The only time he acted up was when someone rang the doorbell. No matter who it was, a neighbor, a delivery guy, even the pizza kid. Murphy would growl softly until Sandra opened the door. It was like he no longer trusted anyone who walked in. One evening, James sat on the back deck, scrolling through local forums on his phone. "You're not going to believe this," he said, waving Sandra over. "What?" Someone posted on Mom Watch Weekly, a group for sharing babysitter reviews. "Look at this." He handed her the phone. The post was written by a mother from a nearby town. "Has anyone hired a woman named Stacy Clean? She said she's new in town. Something about her just felt off. My daughter said she smelled like chemicals." There was a photo. It was Clarissa. Same soft smile, same neat ponytail, different name. Sandra's skin prickled. That was posted 2 hours ago. James was already dialing Officer Marshal. Within 24 hours, the tip led authorities to an Airbnb 30 minutes outside the city. But by the time officers arrived, Clarissa was gone. The place had been wiped clean. No prints, no clothing, no trace, except for one thing, a paw print on the bathroom mirror. At first, they thought it was nothing. But a tech noticed a faint oil mark matched the exact size and shape of a German Shepherd's front paw. Murphy's size. Sandra and James were stunned. "What does that even mean?" James asked. Marshall shook his head. "We don't know. Could be a twisted message. Could be coincidence. But it's strange. Real strange." Later that night, Sandra replayed it in her mind. Clarissa didn't just leave. She marked the mirror as if to say, "I know who caught me." Murphy had gotten under her skin. The family changed their routines. The kids stayed home from school for the week. Sandra kept every door locked, even during the day. James installed a second camera, this one aimed at the street from a mailbox. Murphy stayed calm, but alert. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't anxious. He was watchful, like he'd done this before. And one night, he did something that chilled Sandra to her core. She had just finished putting Tommy to sleep when she saw Murphy standing at the back window, ears forward, tail stiff. She walked over. "Muff, what is it?" He didn't move. She looked outside. Nothing. Just the dark shape of their backyard fence and the glow of the neighbor's porch light. But then, in the corner of the yard, something moved. A flicker of motion. A shadow, then gone. Murphy growled low and deep, a sound Sandra hadn't heard in years. It wasn't fear. It was a warning. She called James. He checked the cameras. There, in the bottom right corner of the outside feed, someone had stood at the fence for 10 seconds, watching. A woman, hoodie pulled low, face turned, gone before anyone could act. The next day, Sandra made a choice. She drove straight to Heroes or Animals, the local rescue group that helped retrain retired service dogs. "I want to enroll Murphy in refresher training," she said. "Protection drills, scent tracking, whatever he needs." The trainer, a former K-9 officer named Ron Talley, smiled. "Ma'am, based on what I've read about your dog, it sounds like he doesn't need the training." "We do." Still, he took Murphy in for 2 weeks of high alert conditioning, and Murphy thrived. He remembered every command. He relearned hand signals. He even reacquired his alert posture to identify narcotics and chemicals. "He hasn't skipped a beat," Talley said proudly. That dog would still pass certification with flying colors. Sandra looked at Murphy with awe. "He's more than a pet. He's a protector." Talley nodded. "No doubt. But don't underestimate what you did, either. You trusted him." That night, as the kids drifted to sleep and the house returned to quiet, Sandra sat on the edge of the couch with her laptop open. The cursor blinked. She opened a new post on Mom Watch Weekly. If you met a sitter named Clarissa or Stacy or Melanie, stop everything. Call your local police. She may seem calm, gentle, harmless, but she's none of those things. And if your dog doesn't like her, listen to him. Trust me. Trust your dog. She hit post. Murphy lay beside her, breathing softly, head resting on her foot. She leaned down and whispered, "We're not done yet, are we?" Murphy didn't stir. But somehow, she knew the answer. The package arrived on a Thursday. No return address. Just a plain brown box on their porch. When Sandra opened the front door to grab the mail, she hesitated. instinctively looking around. The street was empty, silent, with only the faint hum of lawnmowers in the distance. She called James to the door. "You order something?" "Nope," he said, frowning. "Did you?" She shook her head slowly. Murphy came to the threshold, sniffed the air, and let out a short, clipped bark. His body went rigid. James stepped back inside and grabbed his phone. "Let's call Marshall before we touch it." Deputy Marshall arrived within the hour, wearing gloves and a look that said he wasn't surprised anymore by anything related to this case. The box was light, no ticking, no wires. But Murphy didn't relax. Marshall opened it carefully with a utility knife. Inside was a small stack of children's books, all neatly wrapped in plastic. On top was a sticky note in blocky handwriting. For Ellie and Tommy. Thought they'd enjoy the stories. Sandra's knees went weak. Marshall cursed under his breath. "She's taunting you," he muttered, testing how close she can get. James clenched his fists. "She dropped this off herself, didn't she?" Marshall nodded grimly. "Probably within the last 2 hours. She wants to rattle you." The books were scanned, dusted, and taken for evidence. Murphy followed every step, sniffing the box repeatedly and giving a short growl every time someone touched it. "She knows where we live," Sandra whispered. "She already did," Marshall said. "The difference is, now she wants you to know it too." The kids were moved to Sandra's sister's house the next day. It wasn't easy explaining why. Tommy was too young to understand, and Ellie cried the first night she had to sleep somewhere new. Sandra knelt beside her. "It's just for a few days, baby. We want you to have a fun sleepover with Aunt Beth. We'll see you this weekend." Ellie nodded tearfully and wrapped her arms around Murphy's neck. "Can he come?" Murphy licked her cheek, but stayed. Still, he seemed to know he had a job to finish here. Sandra smiled sadly. "He has to help us protect the house." Back at home, James and Sandra didn't sleep much. Every creak, every rustle outside set them on edge. Murphy never left the living room window. And then, 3 nights later, something happened. At 2:14 a.m., their doorbell rang. James bolted upright. Sandra froze. Murphy growled once, deep and low, and ran to the front door, barking furiously. James pulled up the live feed from the front door camera. There was a figure standing just beyond the camera's field of view, only a sliver of shoulder and hair visible. Then the person turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark. By the time police arrived, she was gone, but she'd left something taped to the mailbox. A drawing. It was childish, crayons on construction paper. It showed a stick figure woman standing over 2 smaller stick kids and a black dog with red X's over its eyes. Sandra's hand shook. James punched the siding on the porch. Murphy stared at the drawing for a long time, then turned back toward the house, tense as a bowstring. In the following days, the FBI officially opened a file on Clarissa, now confirmed as Karen Russo. Her history stretched across 6 states. She used over a dozen names, each attached to a trail of suspicious incidents, but never enough to charge. Until now, with this footage, the packages, and the threats, she's crossed the line, Marshall told him. And she's not hiding anymore. She's hunting. Sandra stared at the security footage from that night. She's not just watching us. She's planning something. Murphy hadn't slept that night or the night after. And then he started doing something strange. He began sniffing every vent in the house. At first, they thought it was nerves, but then they noticed he would bark once, short and sharp, at the kitchen vent. Every time, James removed the grate, expecting a dead mouse or some kind of blockage. Instead, he pulled out a small black object, a microphone. Sandra gasped. "She bugged our house?" Murphy had sniffed it out. The FBI took it in immediately. It turns out it had been installed weeks earlier, possibly during Clarissa's first visit, when Sandra had shown her around the kitchen while the kids napped. "She's been listening this whole time," Marshall said. "And waiting," James added. With that discovery, the federal agents insisted they relocate. "But we can't leave Murphy," Sandra said. "He won't leave the house." The agents understood. They arranged for the Olivers to stay in a nearby secure house, but James would return during the day to work from home and monitored property, always with Murphy by his side. That first afternoon alone, James watched Murphy sniff every corner of the living room, then settle at the window. And just after sunset, Murphy growled again. James checked the camera feeds. Nothing. Then he saw in the back alley a woman standing still, staring at the house, holding something. It was a stuffed animal. Murphy barked so hard James thought he'd break the window. He hit the panic alarm. Sirens blared within minutes, and patrol cars swarmed the street, but she was gone again. The only thing left behind was the toy, a plush raccoon, the same kind Ellie slept with. Sandra broke down when she saw it. That night, Murphy wouldn't rest. He paced, whined, barked at the corners of the room. Sandra tried to soothe him, but he remained on edge until around 3 a.m. That's when he suddenly froze. He walked slowly to the back of the house, to the mudroom door. James followed, his flashlight in hand. There was a note slid under the door. Murphy was already standing over it, blocking it with his paws. James picked it up with tweezers. It read, "You can keep hiding them, but I always finish what I start." The handwriting matched the sticky note from the box. James looked down at Murphy, and Murphy looked back with fire in his eyes James hadn't seen since the day he first arrived from the police force. He wasn't just guarding anymore. He was preparing for battle. Murphy had stopped sleeping. It wasn't restlessness. It was purpose, the kind of alertness that came from deep instinct, forged in his K-9 training days and sharpened again by weeks of silent threats. He wouldn't rest until the job was done. Sandra sat at the kitchen table, the house now under round-the-clock police watch. Her coffee had gone cold. Across from her, James paced the room like a man caged with a storm inside him. "She's watching. She's not afraid anymore," he muttered. "She left notes, stuffed animals. Our daughter's name. She's not just playing games. Sandra, she's escalating." "I know," Sandra said. "But how do we stop someone who knows everything, who's always one step ahead?" That's when Murphy walked in from the living room, dropped a crumpled piece of paper at her feet, and sat. Sandra blinked. It was a drawing Clarissa had left on the mailbox. The crude sketch of the woman, the kids, and the black dog with red X's over his eyes. Only now it was torn, ripped straight down the middle. James picked it up. "Is this?" Sandra nodded. "Murphy's eyes. I think he's telling us it's time to fight back." The FBI had already been working quietly behind the scenes, compiling every known movement of Clarissa, a.k.a. Karen Russo. She used cash, burner phones, and temporary rentals. But in every town, one pattern remained. She watched from a distance before she acted. Cameras, bugs, hidden mics. Her MO was always information first. So when Agent Danvers arrived with an idea, James and Sandra were more than ready. "We use her own tactics against her," Danvers said. "We feed her false information." Sandra narrowed her eyes. "Like a trap?" "Exactly. We leak that the kids are coming home for one night. Then we wait." Murphy let out a low, soft growl, as if in agreement. The decoy setup happened fast. The Olivers' house, now wired to the brim with surveillance, was made to look completely normal. Backyard toys were scattered on the grass. Ellie's tricycle was pulled near the porch. Tommy's lunchbox sat forgotten on the steps. But the house was empty except for James, Agent Danvers, and Murphy. Sandra and the kids were tucked safely away in a secure facility upstate. The team created a fake routine. Sandra leaving the house in a car with tinted windows, James waving from the porch, an undercover officer in a wig and hoodie, and a light in the kids' room that turned on every night at 8 p.m. They even left the upstairs window, slightly cracked. A bait, Murphy understood. Every night for a week, he sat under that open window, watching, waiting. Sometimes he perked up when a car drove by too slowly. Other times, he stared at the fence for hours, ears twitching at sounds too subtle for human ears. But nothing happened until Friday. It started at 2:33 a.m. A soft click. One of the back motion detectors tripped. Only for a second. Murphy stiffened. Danvers whispered from the monitor room, "Something's out there." James held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. He clutched the tranquilizer gun the agents had trained him to use. Not lethal, but strong enough to drop someone fast. The infrared picked it up. A figure moved behind the garage. She was here. Clarissa. She wore a black hood pulled low. She moved like someone who had done this 100 times. Quiet, precise. Murphy waited by the stairs, crouched like a shadow. Clarissa pried the screen loose from the open window, and just as she pulled herself halfway inside, Murphy lunged. The takedown was quick, but loud. Clarissa screamed as Murphy clamped down on her arm. Not enough to maim, but enough to immobilize. She struggled, kicking, but he held fast. Danvers and the team were on her within seconds, shouting orders, shining flashlights, and locking her wrists in cuffs. Murphy stood over her until they pulled her away. James leaned against the wall, shaking. It was over. The next day, Clarissa's mugshot was all over the news. Notorious nanny suspect arrested. Caught by retired police dog and undercover sting. Social media exploded with praise from Murphy. Former officers from his unit sent flowers and notes. The mayor scheduled a ceremony. The kids made thank you cards in crayon. But none of that mattered to Sandra until she saw Clarissa's face on the screen and knew, truly knew, it was done. Murphy had stopped the cycle. Back at the safe house, Ellie ran to him the moment they were reunited. "Murphy, you did it." He wagged his tail like any other dog. But Sandra knew. She dropped to her knees and hugged him. "Two, you saved all of us." That weekend, they finally slept without locking every window twice. Murphy curled up beside the fireplace. Ellie left her raccoon plush by his bed. James poured coffee Sunday morning and sat beside Sandra on the back porch. "Do you think she would have hurt them?" he asked. Sandra nodded. "I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if he hadn't stopped her the first time." James glanced through the screen door at Murphy, still dozing in the living room. "I guess there's one lesson in all of this." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "What?" Sometimes the best judge of character doesn't say a word. And maybe that's the question we're left with. What would you have done if your dog tried to tell you something wasn't right? Would you have listened or dismissed it as just a growl? Because in this house, that growl saved everything. 3 weeks after Clarissa's arrest, the Oliver family returned to something that finally resembled peace. No more patrol cars on every corner. No more sleepless nights. No more packages at the door or crayon threats taped to the mailbox. And yet, some habits were harder to shake. Sandra still double-checked every lock at night. James still glanced at the window whenever a car parked too slowly outside. But Murphy slept for the first time in what felt like months. He truly rested. He curled up by the fireplace, stretched long, chest rising and falling in deep, even breaths. The battle was over, and he knew it. One Tuesday morning, a letter arrived with a gold seal stamped on the envelope. James opened it, eyebrows raised. "It's from the governor's office." Sandra leaned over the counter. "For us?" "No, for him." Inside was an official invitation to the state capitol. Murphy had been chosen to receive the Medal of Civilian Valor. He'll be the first animal in over 20 years to be honored. James read aloud. "And only the second dog in our state's history." Ellie, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, dropped her spoon. "Murphy's going to be famous." Murphy thumped his tail on the floor like he already knew. The ceremony was held on the Capitol steps, beneath a giant American flag that rippled in the breeze. A small stage was set up, lined with reporters, local officials, and families who had followed the story on the news. Murphy trotted up the red carpet in a fresh K9 vest, a new tag on his collar engraved with the words, "Protector, Partner, Hero." Sandra stood beside him, holding Ellie's hand. James kept Tommy on his hip. The governor took the podium, clearing his throat before addressing the crowd. "We live in a world where instincts are often ignored, where we second-guess our gut. But this dog, this retired officer, reminds us that sometimes the most silent voices are the most important." He turned to Murphy and clipped the medal gently onto his vest. The crowd erupted in applause. Murphy didn't bark. He didn't jump. He just sat tall, calm, steady, watching, always watching. Back home, Sandra framed the mail beside a photo of Murphy standing between the kids, his eyes locked on the camera like he knew his job wasn't done yet. James started a blog called Murphy Knows, sharing updates and advice for families about pet safety, home security, and how to spot red flags when hiring childcare. It grew quickly, gathering thousands of followers, many of them parents who had stories of their own, stories where their pets had sensed something long before they had. Murphy became more than a dog. He became a reminder. Life slowly returned to normal. Ellie went back to school, where she told everyone her dog had caught a villain. The teacher let her bring Murphy in for a career day, even though he was technically retired. Tommy started saying Murphy as his first real word, stretching out like a song. Muff? Sandra laughed when she heard it, because somehow it felt right. One Saturday evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and fireflies lit up the backyard, James lit a few lanterns while Sandra brought out lemonade and popsicles. The kids ran barefoot in the grass. Murphy lay in the shade nearby, eyes half closed but ears still alert. Sandra looked out at the yard, at the peace that had returned, and said quietly to James, "We almost didn't believe him back when it started." "If we hadn't listened," James nodded, "we'd have missed everything. The warnings, the danger, the truth." He looked down at Murphy, then back at Sandra. "Trust is a funny thing," he said. "Sometimes it barks." Later that night, after the kids were asleep and the lanterns were dimming, Sandra sat on the porch with Murphy curled at her feet. She whispered, "You gave us more than safety. You gave us time. Time to fix what we didn't see. Time to learn to trust the right instincts." Murphy shifted slightly, resting his head on her shoe. And for a long while, they sat there together beneath the stars, quiet, connected, grateful. Sometimes the clearest warnings don't come in words. They come in gut feelings and growls and small, uncomfortable moments that whisper, something's not right. Murphy couldn't speak, but he spoke louder than anyone else in the room when it mattered most. And that's what makes heroes. Not just the ones who wear badges, but the ones who watch quietly, who refuse to let danger slip by, who love so deeply they're willing to stand between it and the people they protect. So here's the question for you. If someone or something you trusted tried to warn you about a hidden danger, would you listen or would you brush it off as nothing? Because sometimes the smallest voice is the one that saves a life.